Hey there, thanks for watching. My name is Christiana and my channel is The Well-Behaved Wallet, where I talk about mindset, motivation, and making or saving money. Today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my July budget preview. So what's the point of this? Why do we do one of these every single month, and what are we hoping to accomplish? So in my mind, the budget preview is kind of like charting your course. You're saying, this is where I'm heading, this is kind of a rough outline of the sketch that I'd like to produce, whereas as the month goes on, you fill in that sketch with the exact details. And sometimes you get a couple marks in the wrong place, and sometimes you are able to make things better than you'd expected. All of this is to say that this budget is telling yourself where you're heading and where you're oriented, rather than just allowing things to happen sort of like randomly and by chance. So not everything on the budget happens exactly as you would like it to happen, but the idea is that at least you have a plan. And what is it saying? 100% of the people, you miss the target 100% of the time if you don't aim for it. So this is just aiming for the target. So with that said, I will share with you my numbers. Now, as I mentioned in my June budget recap, I'm only going to be sharing specifics on the 5 categories of gas, groceries, miscellaneous, transportation, and food out. So gas, groceries, miscellaneous, transportation, and food out. Because those are really the categories where I can have the greatest leverage. Things like healthcare, my tithe, my student loan payment, my phone bill, these are all pretty much recurring expenses, as well as housing, utilities, and any associated housing costs, which in the summer are things like lawn care. So with that said, I'm going to jump in and kind of share with you where I'm at as far as my numbers are concerned. So my income for my day job is roughly about $2,800. It's not super high, but it's what I have for right now. My housing costs, as I've discussed in other videos, are pretty high for what I'm making. So my housing costs are right around $2,000, which means I have only about $800 to play with in my variable spending. So I am going to be super intentional about how I allocate that income, with the idea that while that's what I have right now, and I'm actively working to adjust in the other areas and the housing areas, I really get the most leverage from the variable spending, and really being controlled and intentional about that. So here's what I'm going to spend specifically in those categories. For gas, I've allocated $150. For groceries, I've allocated $150. In the area of transportation, I have $120. In the area of food out, I have $175, and then miscellaneous is $166. And that has that comes to things like, say, like if I do any sort of entertainment or things that would come up like randomly, events or things like that, that they would go into that category. And that is, again, it's pretty variable, and any money left over there would for sure go into my loan sort of repayment. So that's pretty kind of standard. This is kind of again, a rough outline, and that's just to say sort of that things almost never go as you plan that they would go. With that said, there is still a lot that you can do to affect where you're headed in general. Okay, so those are the numbers that I have set out for myself in July. That's the easy part, is that sitting down and making those numbers. Okay, that's easy. Actually, getting the energy to sit down and look at your numbers and say, this is where I'm going to head. All right, that's easy. It's still, I'd say, I don't even know what the numbers are, but I would be interested to know what half of America, I would say less than half of America actually does a budget. So I would say you're ahead of everyone else who doesn't even have a plan set out right now, right? The hard part is actually sticking to that plan. So here are the tactics that I use to help myself stick to the budget. There are 3 things. Number 1, remember where you're headed. That, for me, is saying that, hey, every single decision I make, every time money leaves my account, leaves my wallet, leaves my hand, it better be going somewhere really, really, really important. I had one subscriber leave a comment that said, every dollar is precious. And I'm like, yes, that is so true. Every single dollar is precious. Every single dollar has meaning, has purpose. Those are your freedom fighters, right? Those dollars are your armies of freedom fighters. I'm reading this book called The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. I highly recommend this book. I'm about halfway through it already. I'm like, changed my perception of everything. So I would highly recommend that, and remind you that every single dollar has a purpose. Every single dollar is fighting for your freedom. Don't let them go without a fight. Number 2, raise your standards. This has been a huge thing for me, because on the idea that every single dollar is precious and they're fighting for your freedom, right? Every dollar is a unit of freedom. Remember that you really want to have high standards about where those dollars are going, right? Gone are the days when you just walk in and blow, I don't know. I really was in college when I used to walk into like Target and spend like $150. I'm like, no more. I have a list and I'm sticking to that list. And I can actually tell you, last month there were times when I walked into a grocery store, looked around, couldn't find what I wanted, and full on walked out, because I was like, there's nothing in here worth me spending my money on. I had food at home and I'm going to eat that food before I'm going to buy some more. So that has been huge for me, is saying, you know what, I have higher standards than this, I deserve more. And I guess the toughest parts for me have been when it comes to, I would say, social situations, because it's less of like peer pressure and more of like wanting to have fun and enjoy your friends. And you should absolutely have fun and enjoy your friends and like contribute to things like baby showers or weddings or bridal showers or things like that. Like, that is well and good, and you should absolutely do that and celebrate your friends' milestones. You gotta cut ruthlessly somewhere else, and that has been a big thing, especially what just came up last month with this family vacation that I took, and I'm still kind of moving stuff around to cover that vacation, and I'm like, it's worth it. It's 100% worth it, but my standards have to be pretty darn high, and for me, spending time with friends and family, those are pretty high. Those are high standards. Those meet my standards for sure. So to recap, we have number 2, remember where you're going. Number 1, remember where you're going. Number 2, raise your standards. Number 3, and this is important because you gotta keep up with number 1 and 2 for number 3 to have a chance. Number 3 is remind yourself that this is only temporary. Convince yourself that this is only temporary, meaning this isn't necessarily a way of life. Yes, you're going to be frugal and you're going to work to be aware, you're going to be thrifty, and you're going to be aware, again, awareness is key, of what's going on in your financial life. Ideally, the hope and the goal is to get to a point where you can watch those numbers because you enjoy watching the numbers, but you don't have to watch those numbers anymore. That is my personal dream, is to get to a point where my investments are taking care of themselves, my expenses are a drop in the bucket compared to my net worth. That's the goal, is to have a good, solid, healthy net worth. And that's the dream, is to get there sooner rather than later. So remind yourself, convince yourself, do something every day to let yourself know that this situation where you have right now, this every nickel and dime counts, that's temporary, working toward a larger goal. This is important for me, and this is something that I've only kind of started to incorporate recently. And again, that book, The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco, I will plug it. I will leave an Amazon affiliate link down below because that book is fantastic. So the whole idea is that you're building systems and you're building processes that help create and encourage and sustain wealth. And the idea of being aware of your finances is key. I know that Oprah only has to sign herself every check that's over $100,000. She insists on signing it herself, which I think is a good policy to have. And that when I have a net worth that's in that area, I would have that policy as well. Every check over $100,000, I will sign for myself. So I'm putting that in the book right now. So again, to recap, these are the 3 things that help me out, help me stick to my budget, really have made a difference. Number 1, remember where you're going. Number 2, raise your standards. And number 3, convince yourself, tell yourself, do something every day that reminds you that this situation is temporary. You are on your way up. So those are my 3 tips. That's my July budget preview. As always, I thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you will keep watching.